cannot just chat here.
Good.
So, really out. So that essentially is the agenda. We shall get started. Akansha. So just two sponsors, our platinum, gold, silver, diamond sponsors, Babaji and Shri Ravi Shankar. And I hope they keep sponsoring us forever.
NSC.
And NSC. And thank you NSC for, you should get a slide up. Oh, yeah. Awesome. Thank you. And NSC for really happy hosting us, keeping us here, encouraging this. As I call it, we're in the belly of capitalism, literally. And I hope that whether we can be listed or not, whether all of you can be listed or not, at least the NSC keeps supporting ventures like this. So thank you so much. Anybody from the NSC here?
No, we couldn't make it.
Okay.
They have something happening.
But they're eavesdropping, right? They're hearing us. So.
Yeah, and we'll make sure they watch us on YouTube.
Awesome.
Yeah. So let's start with the Q&A, please.
Yeah.
Suman?
Do we get chairs?
We don't
Yeah?
need.
You don't need chairs?
I don't.
45 minutes, man. No, let's sit. It'll be fun. It'll be fun.
You want to sit? This is another organization.
A couple of. So, any introduction for Suman? Is there an introduction or let him introduce himself?
I just thought that it would be more fun if he introduces himself.
So
You know everything on Google.
So I'll be getting some chairs, Suman. You don't get chairs. Introduce yourself.
Yeah, this is an interesting experience because generally I'm asking him questions. I'm a little unsettled. But it's like,
You can't fool anybody for that.
I have known Alok now for quite a few years and we've had a lot of fun together. And part of being on a board is constantly challenging the entrepreneurs, and I think that's what I've been doing for him. And interestingly, he's been starting to do the same to me now. So we'll see how these roles change. But it's nice to be here. Let's get started.
And Suman, just a little bit, sit please. Maybe just an just a little background of your. A lot of people don't know. I mean, you obviously sound Indian. I made a fun at people who kind of sound American when they go to America. So thankfully, you still sound like an Indian guy, but you live in America. Can you share with them just a quick journey of what happened? And specifically, I was very intrigued about your industrial past, and that's very important for them to understand.
So I moved to the US in '98, and before that, I spent 6-7 years in India working here. I worked in a family business which was in the energy, oil and gas, transportation, very industrial, very much infrastructure, working a lot with the government, doing contracts all over the country kind of thing. So my training was in, business training was actually in India. I'd gone for my undergrad to the US, did my engineering, came back. And then in '98 I went to business school in the US. And I was married by then, my wife and I went to business school together. And '99 was a pretty crazy time in the United States where everybody was writing business plans and money was being thrown at people, which I also did. And I raised money in the middle of business school and suddenly realized now I've taken money from people I can't go back to India. And it was a very interesting revelation. So Malika and I, my wife and I just looked at each other and said, okay, now you've got like $10 million in the bank, what do we do? She said, I don't know, I've never worked a day in this country, I have no idea. She said, oh, we know someone used to make these, she did this interactive DVD and one, so she must know what this internet thing is, let's go talk to her. And that was our first employee and we started a business which took me a good 18 months to shut down. I said, I gotta find a job. I can't leave now, I gotta find a job. So I got a job in the venture business with a friend. And what's interesting is the venture business is all about relationships because these are very small, partnerships are very, very small, 3 or 4 people working together. So there's always some relationship or the other that drives it. It's not a track that people join and then go through and there's no set path. And I've been doing that since. So I joined my fund in 2001, beginning of 2001, and I've been doing that since, and we've invested in over 100 companies. I've sat on 25 odd boards, sold 5-6 companies, shut down a few companies, fired 20 founders, hired 20 CEOs, blocked sales, fought with people, had fun. And I've been doing this in India and in the US, so I'll be bored there. Alok keeps me very busy. That's all I can say.
Thanks, Suman. So let's start off with like the most the headline statement you made in at the Hive conference in Bangalore. You're smiling because you know what that is. And yeah, Suman very appropriately said VCs are a pain in the ass. And the other three panelists on that panel, I know two of them extremely well. Dude, they like their tummy took 3 flips because they were stunned at what you said, right? Their business depends on that. But Suman, that was almost like not a trivial remark. I mean, I'm the guy who makes all these weird, stupid remarks and then have to keep apologizing on Facebook. But you know, everything you say is not measured, but it comes from real insight.
You know, Mike, again, I was that, to get in context, I had just flown in. I was a little jet lagged and a little irritated. I'd done a press conference before that, and you know, with all due respect to the press, the questions weren't all that intelligent. So the challenge is that most people aspire to get someone to invest in their idea or company, and generally speaking, there's probably 1% of, maybe less than 1% of business ideas that fit the model that works for venture capital, which is a very specific kind of company. And 5% get funded from VCs. So you have, let's say 80% of the businesses that are funded by VCs should not have been funded by VCs. And the other way, the entrepreneur should not have gone to a VC to take money. And so what happens is there's this conflict then, where someone's trying to force fit a model on a business that it doesn't belong on. And then there's all sorts of drama. And so my comment was to the audience that, you know, if you can get away without it, don't raise venture money. Because VCs are a pain in the ass. That's what we are paid to do, is to be, you know, writing our entrepreneurs or CEOs very hard so that they accomplish what we hope for our investment to accomplish. Most people think that getting venture money is like this, you've accomplished something. Actually, it's not. It's really you've mortgaged your soul. It belongs to someone else. And remember, VCs are not investing their own money. They're investing their investors' money. So we have a fiduciary duty to the guys we take money from to make sure we do the best for them, which drives behavior. That was the reason I said that. I mean, you love sound bites. You just got that one on.
Yeah, funny enough, it was very appropriately and timely said, because the next 24 hours, Khosla went on stage and said that 80% of VCs muck up the companies that they work for or help. So, it kind of coincided with the whole idea of, pain in the ass is equal to muck up. He was a little more polite.
Well, my first board and first investment was with Vinod.
They say, okay.
And he was a pain in my ass.
So, Suman, this is like a very motley bunch of, I think a lot of how many of you guys are wannabe entrepreneurs? Right. So, wannabe entrepreneurs. How many of you guys are entrepreneurs? As in, okay, now that doesn't mean that, you write a blog, man. I mean, you actually do something. So, because otherwise, if you're working in McKinsey and writing a blog and say, I'm an entrepreneur. So, real entrepreneur. And how many of you guys don't want to be an entrepreneur? That's not true. They're not putting up their hands because they're shy. But if you could see the note, the audience is obviously want to be and trying and striving. They're living in kind of very difficult times, Suman. I mean, not that venture capital was ever easy. So let me go back a minute. Forget the funding part. What's happening now, as I look at it, is there's a lot of opportunity. But I specifically speak from the India context, right? Because we don't have the ability to kind of sit in the valley or sit in the US. When I look at TechCrunch, not that it's my reference, but when I see the stuff getting funded, when I see the ideas, forget whether they're funded or not, they just blow me out. Like, I haven't even heard of those 23, out of the 10 things, 8 of them I don't even understand sometimes. You have to read. So are we now completely separated because they're separated by 2 oceans? Are we like literally an island floating away from the world, or what do you think is the India scene? And what do these guys do, including me?
It's a lot of questions, so let me answer one. I'll give you a story for one of them. There's a friend of mine who's a VC, and he'd been in the business for a while, reasonably successful, a little bit older, and he started having these panic attacks. And it was a medical condition, and we always like, what's happening here? We saw a doctor, couldn't figure out what's going on. Went and saw a therapist, talked to the therapist for 2 days, multiple sessions. In the end, the therapist says, "Can you just stop reading TechCrunch?" Because there is so much going on, and if you keep trying to keep up with it, you're going to have panic attacks. Just forget about who's doing what. So figure out what you want to do and then focus on that. And I think that's critical because there is information overload. And you have the blog from Rodinhoods, then you have the blog from this, and you have the TechCrunch and All Things D and a conference here. And you say Andreessen Horowitz has funded that, and Sequoia has funded that. I mean, it's good and fine to have information, but it really is not relevant to what you're doing. Whatever the concept or idea, focus on that business and try and figure out what's the value you bring to that ecosystem, given all of the other players in it. So that's one thing. I wouldn't worry about what's going on in TechCrunch. India and the opportunities are very wide, very, very wide and difficult question to answer in a small time frame. But there's a lot going on here, but I also feel like people here have a very naive notion about what it takes to build a company to compete globally. Doesn't mean it can't, it just means that people have to learn that. There is an influx of I would say, talent that has that exposure. It's either exposure in big companies here or exposure from outside of the country and bringing that in. And especially I noticed in Bangalore, I saw it more. When it comes to domestic businesses, there's a tremendous amount of opportunity. Some of my best investments have been companies here in Bombay going after the Indian market. So I think there's always opportunity. I guess the inbuilt obstacles for the first step of the company are much harder in India. So you can think about, every company goes in steps. There's never a steep, there's never a curve or a line like that. The steps are just steeper in India. If you get over the step, you've accomplished a lot more than the first step you do in the US. But it's a big step. A lot of companies, people fail before then. There's been a lot of, India is a country of entrepreneurs, including the guys in political office. They're all entrepreneurs. And the guy who's sitting outside the political office who wants his 20 rupees before you go in, he's an entrepreneur. So I don't think culturally there's any issue. There's just systemic problems, and I think, look, in certain areas it's easier to solve. Technology and internet is one such area, but there's no real asset, so it's easier for a company to get started. You just have to be very creative.
So, I think, Suman, the other challenge you've seen is that a lot of young entrepreneurs now are assuming that getting funded is becoming an entrepreneur. There's a kind of a mixed notion of technology equals to funding equals to entrepreneurship. Not the classic way of, you work for an ice cream company and, ice cream factory. That was really entrepreneurial. So, in the West, do you see that misnomer or, I just want to I keep meeting a lot of people who say, I'm not a technology guy. So what does that mean? So what? You can, Presto is a company that, washes clothes and irons them, and it's probably a $200 million company. So, you flip burgers, you do courier delivery. Who cares? So what's this misnomer?
And honestly, it's confusing because it's not very different in the US either. There's a lot of people in the US, and I'd say Silicon Valley is a little bit of an outpost. Maybe in some portions of New York, Boston, and LA have people who are who have an understanding of this ecosystem that we live in, that I live in. But I'd say 99% of entrepreneurship is done outside of that ecosystem. Even in the US, Europe, go wherever, it's very much this. The venture business is a very small component of the entrepreneurial ecosystem. Very, very small. Fortunately for me, and unfortunately for a lot of other people, it grabs attention because the successes are very large successes. So no one talks about, for that one success, the 9 companies that failed. It's just the press loves big stories, and it's a big story when you have a Twitter going public and it's going to be a $14 billion valuation. It's a big story. But for every Twitter, there's probably 1,000, if not 100,000 companies that are making money, sustaining organizations and people and families and really entrepreneurs. So I don't think there's any correlation between entrepreneurship and venture capital. Having said that, to start something, either takes a lot of sacrifice or takes a lot of support. And that support can come in forms of moral support, can come in form of financial support, can come in form of PBs, whatever that is. All of that is very important. And I never heard of venture capital till 99. I never, growing up in India and working here, I never heard of what that is. So when someone said, I can remember, tell you a story, I didn't even know what a brokerage was. I walked into Jeffries and Company, the largest company, and I knew the chairman had come to India and I met him, and I walked in and asked the receptionist, what did these guys do? So it's not, these are new things and things happen and you learn and you move on. So for me, the best businesses don't need venture capital. They can use it to grow faster. So that's another way of thinking about it.
Nice. Very nice. Guys, there are a few chairs there, so if you can, you can come and squeeze in and, kind of sit on someone's lap if you have to as long as possible. Few chairs, this side, few chairs that side. So, Suman, we've got a little bit of a fair idea on the macro, on the economy and the overall scenario, but if we just go back to now a little more deeper into individuals and what they think of, and a lot of people are young, very well educated, motivated, but there are a lot of confusing signs of what to say, what to do, what to be thinking of when you meet potential partners, investors. So forget the fun, but I know you invest in your personal capacity in people, businesses, ideas. What are the 2 or 3 things that you really look for, or rather, let me restate, that's a very cliche question. What kind of makes you say, I want to partner with this guy, or a woman, more importantly?
Honest answers, I don't know. I think there are times when your instinct tells you that something is going to be interesting, and then you use data and diligence to sort of prove your instinct right or wrong. And I think that's the way most entrepreneurs should understand how an investor thinks. An investor doesn't sort of do diligence to get to a place where they want to invest. They first want to invest and then do diligence to make sure that their gut is right or wrong. Everybody has their own model. Even within my own partnership, each partner has a different way of thinking about investments in different areas they like. I see opportunities because I'm on the boards of a lot of companies, so I can see what pain points need to be solved in adjacent areas around what people are doing. You're always meeting people, you're learning, but having said that, VCs don't act that, I don't know what he's doing.
You're asking us VCs don't act, and I don't know what he's doing.
Yeah.
That's what he said. It's right.
So that's what we keep noticing things like that. I was reading a book about George Soros and his investing style, and that's a different type of investor, big hedge fund. He had one lunch with another hedge fund guy, and he moved $6 billion from one currency to another after that lunch. So why he did that after that lunch, God knows. He did it. He was right. It worked. He made a lot of money. If it was wrong, he would have lost a lot of money. That's how investors sort of have to think. I invest in companies very, very early, before they're really even companies. They're ideas and people I want to work with. And so it's for me more about the person than it is about anything else. But there needs to be a common belief around where the opportunity in the market is. Not the product, but where's the opportunity in the market? What's changing in the ecosystem that allows for a new entity to be created to solve a problem? Why can't someone existing solve it? And that's a conversation. Sometimes that conversation takes an hour, sometimes it takes 3 months, sometimes it just never coalesces into something real. So it's all over the place.
Suman, one of the key, I'm just kind of zigzag between operations and opportunity, but since these are, and I'm not prepared for this, so this is all as it is. One of the key, really important things I've learned from you, and I keep learning and I keep forgetting, is what to measure, that's micro, but what to look for and what to not look for. And just while I know I'm saying many things in one sentence, but there's a blog I wrote about how I was running an MMOG game and I was completely measuring the weirdest stupid metric in that game, and he kind of had to bear me for 2 board meetings till he said, Alok, what does that number do? And I said, I don't know. So how can you, what is your guidance to these, to all of us on focusing on what to measure?
Um, it's also a very large question because it's different for any and every company. But I'll tell you, there's one thing I've learned in all the companies I've been involved in. There is one fundamental thread, something very core to one very core thing to a company. And if you look at every successful company, they have one thing, one metric that is core to them. And if you find it and you focus on it, your chances of success are multiplied n times. So in the case of LinkedIn, it's number of connects. In the case of Facebook, it's the same. In the case of Google, it was page rank. There's one thing that becomes the core metric. Now, it's only meaningful once you're in business and you start measuring it at a certain number. Before that, it's a lot of instinct, it's a lot of design, it's a lot of testing. But if you don't know what you're striving for, you'll never know what you're building towards, right? You have to have that. There's only one thing that matters. You got to figure out what that is. In the case of asking you that question, I was naive about the gaming world, and I didn't understand what this was. And he kept talking about, I'll give you another example. I was just starting out, and I was in this business which was providing internet connections in the country. So it's like, it's a DSL provider. And we put a lot of money in it. Company raised $150-some million. The market had crashed. And I was in a board meeting, and they kept using a word called, an acronym, TSBs. We have 100 TSBs, we're going to go to 300 TSBs. And I've never forgotten it. I was saying, I'm an engineer, and I've done 2 degrees, and I just don't understand what this means. So I went online after I got home, I looked and I couldn't find anything. I said, what is this TSB? There must be some new thing. Can you guess what it was?
No, man, I'm not even an engineer. So.
I wish I'd known that, but it means tall, shiny buildings. Because that's how they measure their business. How many buildings can they capture and sell DSL connections to?
So this is net zero.
This is a company long gone. It's called Internet Connect.
And it's not. It
oh, we shut it down. I had to fire 2,000 people, took it to bankruptcy, got it out, then someone else bought it from us. Lots of drama. Just the founders had bought Porsches, and the market crashed, and Goldman Sachs ran away, never saw them again. It was a very interesting experience.
Someone said, zeroing back in today's world of dhanda, the nice classical word. Now, my grandfather, my father, my dada, he's no longer alive, but if he was around, they would never understand the business I've been running for 15 years, which is try and sell something that may not even be sold for cash, get traffic, get visibility. None of these guys believe it. Half these guys don't believe what I do anyway. I was talking about YouTube to someone, and I have a PPT on how YouTube was sold for 1.4 when they were $1 billion and they were losing lots of cash. So the central question, Sumant, of the philosophy of losing cash, month on month, Y on Y, to build something, and how long and how deep is that philosophy, and how do you get someone to understand that?
That's different for every investor. So there's some investors that can stomach it and some that can't. And I was with a very, very successful investor once, and he was Indian guy, and he's been, he ran a company, sold it for $7 billion, and very successful. And he said, if Google came to me or Facebook came to me, I couldn't invest in it. There's no business model, And he's very successful, but he has his own way of looking at an investment or a business design. So I guess the only way we do it, in the way we justify it, there's a lot of hope involved, and is if the end outcome is large enough. If it works, does it significantly impact the ecosystem and change how people do things? And if it does, then great. And it's not just consumer companies. It's core technology companies have sucked up hundreds of millions of dollars of cash before they start being businesses that start showing a profit. Because to develop something that's really core innovation takes time and effort. You can't shortcut them. A lot of companies fail because they're not fully capitalized. They just don't raise enough money. And the compromise because that's all there's on offer, and it's better to be in business than not be in business. But half the time when we are investing, at least I spend a lot of time making sure that we are investing enough to achieve what we hope to achieve, with enough cushion that if we miss, by the way, every company misses, you give yourself enough leeway to experiment. Different stages, different amounts of money, different types of opportunity. We did, one of my partners was the first investor in PayPal. I think PayPal took $270 million of cash, and it was still losing money when it was acquired. You know, it was one of those businesses. And the reason was, remember, PayPal grew by saying, if you open an account, we'll give you $10 in it. It's a no-brainer. People open an account. So there's a lot of that happens. But there was a belief, and there was enough money around the table to play out that belief, that if it works, it's going to be completely transform the payment ecosystem of the country, of the world, actually. And it did.
So, something that you've been pressing me, and I've never got down to, admittedly, never got down to ingesting it because I'm scared. But let me kind of make a confession about having a point of view and betting yourself on that point of view. And I think a lot of the Indian psyche is यार थोड़ा safe खेलते हैं, थोड़ा बहुत चलने दो गाड़ी को, we'll try, थोड़ा try करते हैं. But ऐसा नहीं हो जाए कि गाड़ी बंद हो जाए. And you're saying, man, just rip the wheels off and just go down the hill. So, I know that
in a measured way.
Yeah.
There is only one thing that you can't get enough of, and that's the time that you spend doing something. You spend a year and it's gone. It's never coming back. So it's better to have a point of view and just wholeheartedly go at it. And know as quickly as you can if it's real or not. Because if it's not real, you can start something else. At least that's the way I think about it. I think India has a different... there's still a little bit of stigma around failure, which there shouldn't be, because if you don't fail, you haven't tried hard enough. And in our business, we say if 1/3 of the companies are not failing, then we're not taking enough risk. Which means that we're not going and betting on risky stuff that can be real transformative. And so, it's not easy whenever a company fails and people are losing jobs, and I've seen enough of that. It's never easy. But that year lost is gone forever. You also have a belief that if you fire someone from your company, the quicker you fire them, the quicker they'll find what they're good at and where they can go. Because if you keep working and keep them sort of going and compromising on it, they will never grow, they will never find what they're good at, and you're doing them a disservice. At least that's how I justify it.
So let's talk about the firing business. So that kind of intrigues me and scares me. This is nightmare time, so it's all in the daytime. Nightmares are coming out. But I was in Suman's office a month back, and he introduced me to a very happy guy. He's like bubbling and so smiley, and he was jumping all over the place. And Suman was saying, "Let's do this." He came in, came out. Then Suman said, "Hello, this is a new guy we've got," sitting right outside Suman's office. And I thought, wow, man, I mean, this guy must be some really cool dude, sitting in the Clearstone office. Suman's happy, he's happy. And then behind closed doors, Suman said, he was one of the co-founders in a company, and I fired him. And after I fired him, here he is setting up something else for you. So that guy seemed to not be affected, but seemed to be happier. And you said you fired a lot more people. The other guy in the gaming company that we know of. And again, you said I'd like to hire him for something else. So there seems to be a very new paradigm that I have not come across. And again, a lot of us have not come across, which is, of course, I know investors firing CEOs and everybody else. I haven't had the honor of being fired yet, but I do have company coming up. I can. I tell my team that, right? But, we've had a couple of people who got fired in Mobile to Win, and it was very acrimonious. And I don't think, Suman, those VCs will ever even respond to a male entrepreneur. So this is very, I still can't believe it, right? I mean, why did you fire those people? Not why as in the reason, but what did you, was it a clinical reason? Was it a personality problem? What is it that makes you fire entrepreneurs?
Well, there's entrepreneurs that I've had disagreements with my partners that we wouldn't work with again. And normally those are more fundamental, when you have a fundamental difference in sort of how you think of the world, right? What do you think is important? What do you think is honest? What do you think is moral? What do you think, if there's some stuff like that, then obviously that's a different story. But there's also when people are, we don't call it firing, we call it transitioned out. For reasons of maturity, and maturity not of their personal maturity, but of the job and the changing nature of the company. So someone who starts a company and takes it from 0 to 50 people as the CEO, and then takes it from 50 to 200, and from 200 to 1,000 or 2,000, very different skill sets. Very different skill sets. One is, you need aspiration, you need inspiration, you need a lot of work perspiration, and you have to have a lot of, I would say, conviction, right? That comes from the founder. It comes from saying, I'm going to break this wall. I don't care if you're with me or not, but I'd like you to be, and then people follow you. It's a real form of leadership. And then from 50 to 200, generally when the company is transitioning there, you're in this teenage years of the company where, people who are in the early guys don't like the new guys because they say, how dare he come in, and I've been doing this forever, what does he know, and all sorts of drama happens. And then from there on, it's a process job, which is about functions and divisions and management and, whatever, call it whatever. And so sometimes what happens is early founders don't find themselves with no role in the company. That's what happened with that guy. He was chief operating officer, then we made him chief technology officer, then we became chief strategy officer. One day he came and says, there's not enough chiefs left, man. I don't know what to do. So I just want you to come work with me. And that's how that happened. But that's happened in, I've recently been invested in a location-based services company. It was very early. It was even before the iPhone came out. I think we were too early. Tried very hard to build a business. There was just not enough business. We shut it down. It was us and 3 other investors. It was a smooth shutdown. The team tried very hard. They did everything they could. Timing was wrong. They just didn't figure out the product right. And the founder was very upset, and then he went and worked for a big company. And about 3 months ago, I rehired him to be CEO of one of my companies where I thought his skill sets would actually fit. That company needed an idea guy, not a process guy. And so, wanted someone with that DNA to come in. So it's all about that. I think one thing we've learned, at least I have learned, is always to be respectful when you're doing this, and that creates for good relationships. A lot of people don't have the time for it. It's not like they don't want to do it. But in our business, because you have so many companies, you end up taking shortcuts and you don't have time for it, and then people get all bothered.
So it doesn't take too much time to say a few nice words and to say, look, dude, I like you, but I don't think you're fit for the job. So why are VCs such monsters? I mean, why is it that, I'll be honest, right, Sumant, I unfortunately have had a lot of VCs in my life, and this is not to flatter you, but out of the 10 I've had, 5 have been like really nasty, 3 have been, I don't know who they were, man. They were just like, ghosts in my boardroom. And one was like on and off, was the on and off guy. And you're involved, and you're, I would say, I don't want to kind of make the misnotion that Suman this kind. I think he's what he should be, which is an investor. You want me to succeed.
You're very lucky that I don't live here. I live in the US. That's one. Second, there are boards I've been on where the CEO would say, man, I don't just understand this guy. Why doesn't he see the world my way? And generally, he can't fire me, which is the privilege of the job I have. So we fire him. I fire him. And it's happened, and this is not necessarily pleasant for both sides. It just sort of is what life is, and you kind of make up for it. And it's a lot of lost time when that happens. So I don't know the other VCs or what they do. I have worked with some that I have enjoyed working with. I have been on boards where I've been like, why am I on board with this guy who's another VC from another fund, or not a VC, the CEO? People are people, there are all sorts in the world. And there is no particular definition for what makes for success. A lot of the biggest assholes on boards have been the most successful VCs I know. So maybe I'm doing the wrong thing. Who knows, right? It's a question of your own style, and you've got to find someone you can work with. I'll give you an example of, I won't give names, but there's a very older entrepreneurial guy, Indian by descent, built 3 companies that combined sold for $25 billion. Very successful. And he had a term sheet from a VC who's notoriously rough. Notoriously, but also very successful. Another Indian guy. He said, I didn't know what to do. I needed the money, so I went into his office and I said, look, here's the deal. I'd love you to invest. I will, but I wanted an understanding between you and I. If you have any problem with the company, you will not reach out to anybody else but me. Talk to me directly. And after you talk to me, you can talk to whoever else. I should be in the know. And if you have anything you want to say, I promise to listen respectfully. Come to an understanding, and then after we come to an understanding, no second guessing. It doesn't have to be you're right or I'm right. We'll come to an understanding. And that worked out brilliantly for them. They created, the names of the companies were Sept, Sierra, and Stratum One, which were 3 very large technology exits in the last 10 years. There's other people who sat with the same VC who haven't had that, couldn't make that happen.
So, guys, you can come here and sit on the stairs. It'll be far easier. Some of the guys at the back who are standing, you can just come and sit here if you want. So that will be more convenient and more helpful. Suman, this is all sounding like so personality driven, right? And I mean, it's so much of, I want to push destiny into this.
I want to ask you a question.
Yeah,
You
sure.
talked about 2 CEOs in the beginning.
Say that again?
You talked about 2 CEOs who
Yeah.
wrote that book. Steve Jobs. Personality?
Absolutely.
Was that company personality driven?
I think so. Absolutely.
Mark Benioff.
I don't know him, but
Mark Benioff, I've known Mark for years and years. Mark, when he started Salesforce, you know what he did? He went outside Oracle World, which is Oracle's biggest conference, stood outside the gate with a bunch of people carrying placards saying software is dead. He just stood outside. The police had to come to remove him. He didn't say I'm starting a new company. He said software is dead. It's not about software. Salesforce is a software company. He used to work at Oracle. He was a VP for Harry Ellison. And so, real personality, larger than life personality.
so that's awesome, right? I mean, that's one of the things that's subdued. And a lot of us feel very, very cautious and very, very cagey when we talk about our beliefs and what we want to do and what we think we should do when we go into an investor room.
It's a cultural thing. I think there's different cultures. In the US also there are, I'd say technology is one place it's work, media it's work. It's not work in manufacturing. Can't think of too many personalities in the world of manufacturing, I don't know the right answer. I think India is also, there is a definite, it's a hierarchical society. Our families are hierarchical, social stratas are hierarchical, everything is hierarchical, but the US is not. The US is much more a meritocracy, and that's how that country is built. So there is a cultural difference. There's no way you can avoid it, 100%. But you should understand who you are and what you're trying to accomplish. And then, the other thing I'll say is when you go to meet a VC or an investor bank or whatever, you have to understand what they are looking for. You have to. It's like selling a customer. You're trying to solve their point. Without compromising your belief. And it's a hard balance. If you can't do that in the first meeting and you compromise, you're setting yourself up for failure because every board meeting is going to compromise more and more and more and more, even if you get the money.
I think we can go on and on, but
Is it okay if we open it up to audience
exactly.
questions?
So just one last question, and then we can start
Sure.
opening it up because I'm sure there are a lot of people who are tired of me at least, not you. You are tired of me. So maybe the last question. So Suman, this whole co-founder thing, I mean, a lot of people and there are a couple of guys in this room who've been asked by VCs to go back home and says, boss, co-founder paida kar lekar aao. Now how do you manufacture a wife? How do you manufacture a co-founder when you don't have one? Maybe wife's easy, but not the co-founder. So, yeah, it is, man. So what is this? Are you like stuck on that, or why do VCs say that?
I think it's important, and actually, teams are important. teams that can work with each other are very important. And co-founders are especially important because no one person can build a company. You have to have clearly defined roles and you have to have a good balance. And honestly, the reason why a co-founder is very important and best is if you have 3 people who start a company is because they can talk to each other to solve problems. I have partners, they're my co-founders of the firm. Whenever I have an issue, a real important decision in front of me, I just go and talk to them. I may not listen to them 100%, but it's very nice to get someone else opinion and that has the same, is alignment of interest with you, same side of the table as you. My best companies have always been where there have been more than 2 co-founders, actually. But there has been one leader. It's clear between them that there's one guy who's going to be the guy I relate to and talk to, but there's a team behind him and they're aligned. Not equal, they don't have to be equal, there just has to be a team. Another reason why it's important in India is it's very hard in India to hire senior management. Very hard. In fact, I would say it's almost impossible to hire someone at the co-founder level. You can after you're a 100 crore company or higher, right? But below that, it's very hard. And so that's why VCs don't want to take that risk of having to look for someone after you've invested. You want someone there that you can invest in. But angels can, and that's what bridges you from your friends and people who you know and your boss and your whoever in your life has been more successful. They can bridge you to a place where you can build a team and then go out and address the more institutional investor market. And again, with the caveat that you may not be the fit for the institutional investor market anyway.
That helps. So, shall we just ask people in the house? Do we have any Suman curated questions?
Yeah, we have 2 questions which have come in, and the others we'll just open it up to audience.
If you guys are tweeting, use the hashtag.
I've already told you. TRH, yeah. So we have 2 questions which are curated. So would you like to get up and ask? People who sent in those 2 questions. Nishant Agarwal, you're here? Yeah, go ahead, please.
My question is that in India, most of the companies which are based, their market is India. When you talk about building a company, they say, does it have a market in India? So why are we not building global companies? As a VC, what do you think about this? Is it something that's pulling us back? Or is it simply the mindset?
No, I think it's a question of are you close to your customer. It doesn't matter where your customer is, you have to be close to your customer. And that's the same when it is, you're physically close to them too, because that's the only way you learn what their problems are and what you're trying to solve. So, I've invested in a lot of companies that don't have a market in India. One right here. So it's a question of how can you get close to your customer. In a lot of cases, you have to build a sales force outside the country, and that's very expensive. What the needs of the market are, without having to spend a lot of money doing it outside. That's, I think, the reason why.
But as a VC, is it something that, what do you feel about it? Is it something good that we are focusing on the Indian market without going global?
Yeah, but that's a question, like you're saying, as a VC, is not the right question because every VC has a different opinion. Otherwise, we'd all be wearing the same clothes and eating the same food. Everyone is different. I think there are some VCs who like that, some that don't care.
And Suman, the whole Israeli model and the fact that a lot of good companies have been built out there is the fact that these guys, because they didn't have a local market.
Yeah, but remember Israel, the reason Israeli companies have been so successful, there's actually 2 reasons. And we do a lot of work in Israel. Israeli companies are deeply technical companies. And 9 out of 10 of them come from one unit within the Israeli army. They have always one founder from one unit, which is their counter espionage, whatever, threat detection unit. And second, there is a very strong Israeli network in the US.
Mafia.
Yeah, call it the Jewish mafia. And they help each other. They're very tightly coupled. There is no such network for India. Indians are generally in many networks. There's no one network.
I have a question to ask. So, Sumant, aside of the obvious, let's not talk about the exit in successful companies. What are the three things which really make a successful VC?
I'm trying to figure that out. I don't know. I think for me, the VCs I've enjoyed working with and I've seen succeed have vision. They're not functional as much as they are people who can see ideas in the future. They are secure. They're not trying to prove themselves. Generally comes from having been successful in the past. Right? Whether it's been successful as an investor or as an entrepreneur. And third is very subjective. Someone would say, hey, it's about knowing if dopamine, deep. Someone would say, and there are all sorts. I don't know. The third is very hard for me to say.
So, if I were to ask you that as a VC, what do you think has been your most successful or the most heartening,
Lucky.
achievements
Been
of
very
life?
lucky.
Been very lucky.
So that's my favorite topic, right? Consciousness and luck, and Sumant's kind of helped me develop that. So really, Sumant, with all due respect, I mean, how much? I know this is not like a high school question. What's the weightage of luck in a company? But is it really important to be lucky?
I'm going to characterize luck as timing. I'm going to characterize luck as events. I'm going to characterize luck as relationships. And sometimes things just kind of merge together and they look easy from the outside, but it happened by chance, by luck, call it whatever. But the most successful guys recognize that there's something happening. I'm going to exaggerate it, not just ignore it. And that's just being aware of what's happening, right? That's the kind of people that you want to work with, who are aware of what's happening, what changes are going on, who's important, how do you make that happen. So you can't coerce it. But the difference between a super successful company and an also ran can be a variety of things.
Sure. Yeah.
Guys, you still, can someone help those guys come?
Why did you guys just walk in? Come on.
Yeah.
Come on,
Come here and
you can come and sit on the stairs here.
You can come
sit on the stage here.
Stage like Shishyas, all the stuff.
Come on.
Please.
You don't want to be close to us. Okay, fine.
Yeah, do.
Yeah, Pawan, go ahead, please.
Now, a lot of entrepreneurs actually protect their product. And the product. Sorry, no problem.
A lot of entrepreneurs protect their product, and through VC the product is entrepreneurs. You mentioned something about a huge step in India that entrepreneurs need to cross. That huge step gets a lot smaller in China because over there the government actually helps entrepreneurs. Here it's become detrimental. So first we face our family, then the audience, then the market, then the government, which puts even more impediments in the entrepreneur's book. So as a venture capitalist and as an industry of venture capitalists, are the VCs actually talking to our government to actually make life easier for entrepreneurs in any way? Because I haven't heard any such stories. So I just want to know if there's something that I don't know.
As like any industry, I think there's a dialogue between the government and the venture community as well. The venture community in India is very small. So I don't think it's important enough for the government yet. There's other problems that are way more pressing. I don't think that's an issue as much as I think there is a cultural bias against risk-taking. Or there are communities that have, in India over generations, been more risk-taking than communities that have not been. And so, that's not true in the US. In fact, I'd say I have 5 entrepreneurs I'm very close to and on boards of in the Bay Area right now. All 5 of them are Indian. All 5 of them come from one city in India. All 5 of them went to the same colleges. All 5 of them are PhDs. And so they're Indian. They grew up here. They went to school here. But once they were out of this country and in the valley, they sort of blossomed into being very successful entrepreneurs. That'll happen here too. It's happening. If I go to Bangalore, you see it happening a lot. You see it in pockets in Bombay. You see it in pockets outside of Delhi. So it's changing. Like anything else, change takes time.
Yeah, Shweta.
Sir, as an extension addition to your statement, as you said that the company has to be very physically present to the customers that they are catering to. What would you say about Airbnb? It's an American company, but it is catering to customers all over. And do you see such kind of trend happening from a company like India-based company if it wants to cater to a global audience, global customer? And how easy will it be, like for Airbnb, because it is in America? So do you think it was easy for it to cater to the global customer?
So just a question so that everybody hears what she asked. She said she gave a reference of Airbnb, and the question is, how easy is it for an Airbnb who grew out of America to have happened in India?
Has it happened?
As
No,
in,
it
is
hasn't
it
happened.
catering to global customers?
And I'll be honest, I mean, while Suman, it's for you to answer, but when I heard of the concept, I said, forget it. No way. How can someone come in my house
But
suddenly and stay? Boss
that's-
to uda dega ghar ko.
But that's
So-
like couch surfing. I mean, even that would be called very stupid, but that's happening all over.
Yeah,
Even
so
I
I think that's the cultural thing, right, Suman? I mean,
It's not, so let me say this. Airbnb is a very interesting model, and it is an interesting model not just because it's for people coming in their home. It's about people being able to share an unused asset, whatever that asset is. Right now it's a couch in your house, it could be a car, Uber is for taxis, or you know. So there is a model that has been created by some companies that has been exaggerated by people like Airbnb. Now your question was more, is it easier for a US company to cater to a global audience? I'll tell you why it's easier. They built scale in the US market first. They became a substantial company, so they could hire people and raise enough money for that because of what they had accomplished in the US. If you have to build the same company out of India, you have to first be successful in the US, not just in India, because it's not big enough. If you can be big enough here, raise enough money, hire the right talent to go after different countries, you can do it out of here. It's just harder.
which is the ecosystem which is much more developed.
Yeah, you have to show your success first in where you are, which allows you then to get the resources to go outside of where you are, like any company. I've made mistakes where I've gone global with companies too quickly, and then you have to retreat and fire people because it's hard to manage when you're a smaller company. Very hard to manage a multi-geography business. You can do it once you're at a certain size and scale.
but Suman, even culture, right? There's such a big change in culture. I mean, I'll be honest, I was till 38, I'd never heard of the concept that you can take food in a restaurant and eat it. Because in India it's not done. And in the US, I saw everybody doing that, and that was like a shocker to me. So this is just an instance, but yeah.
When you identify changes in culture, you build Facebook. You have to keep watching for that.
Any other questions? You had a question, yeah. Go ahead.
This is a follow-up to the Israeli comment that you made. You said that 9 out of 10 co-founders are from the same one unit, right? The counter-espionage unit. So that obviously tells you that it's the nurture side of things, not the nurture side of things that's coming into play here. And I believe that they are I believe in the concept of deliberate practice. So what is it that they're actually practicing that in that unit, which is basically coming out in the real world and allowing them to be as successful as founders of good companies?
Part of it is myth, right? Once it happens, people believe, so it happens more. So it self-perpetuates. The reason why I said that, it may not be 9 out of 10, it may be 5 out of 10 or whatever the number is, it's a very inordinate number, is because those guys are the most specialized, critically trained in one particular area. If you look at the concept of cybersecurity, you see there is a strong, heavy Israeli push into that area. They all come out of that one thing. And now they're technically very, very astute. Doesn't mean that they're good businessmen. They've just been trained to be exceptional technologists in that area and then expand from there. So payments, fraud, cybersecurity, credit cards, all the stuff that happens in the online financial community, all have some influence from that one place. Checkpoint came out of there, Palo Alto Networks came out of there, a bunch of big companies came out of there. It's expertise, and then it's a self-perpetuating myth. It's like saying, hey, if you worked at McKinsey, you're smart. Maybe.
Ankit?
Hi, my name is Ankit, and I want to ask if you could introduce three things in Indian ecosystem for venture capitalists, what would be those three things?
A license to practice. I don't know, this is again one of those balance things, right? When things start moving, when the economy starts showing itself to be conducive to people creating new companies, money flowing in, these companies that are now, the new batch of companies that have been invested in the last 5-7 years start showing exits, which is going to happen in the next 2 or 3 years. There's a lot of companies doing very well. Then you'll have more of that community develop. So I think part of it is just patience. Startups take good 10 years to mature. And patience is something you have to learn in the venture community. And that's the challenge. We always are fighting to make things happen faster. That just goes against what nature intended for those companies to do. So that's one. I don't know if I can answer your question in a way that's meaningful, because every country and every ecosystem develops in its own way. I've met a lot of very smart VCs here, people who understand how the game is played, and yet are very aware of what's happening in India and what's the ground reality. So there's no dearth of talent or people who understand how the business is supposed to be done. There is a level of maturity of the ecosystem, and that just takes time. It's a very young ecosystem. It's 10, 12 years old.
So, Darshan, you wanted to ask something? We'll do couple of more quick questions. Yeah.
Hi, Suman, and good evening, everybody. Welcome to TRHS. I almost have no doubt that people would be asking you questions as to I have an idea. Would you support me or probably fund me at a later stage or whatever? But then an idea going up to execution and funding. I will not touch those questions. That was not my point here. Basically, what I wanted to ask you was, once you have, finalized or have been talking to a lot of people or companies for funding, and they start up, and probably, they start earning. How do you probably save money to become a VC and invest in other companies?
There is no answer to that. The only thing I can say is there's all sorts of VCs. The money I invest from the fund is not my money. Part of it is my partner's. But I have customers. My customers are the state pension plans, the endowments, the people who've been very successful entrepreneurs that have made hundreds of millions and not billions, who want to now invest in this ecosystem. And so I provide them a service. And so it's a service business to a great degree. And so you just have to say, look, if I want to be in the startup ecosystem, get involved in the startup ecosystem, and who knows where that takes you, whether it's in the venture route or the entrepreneurial route, or from entrepreneur to VC, or from VC to entrepreneur, or VC to banking. God, I hope not, but stuff like that.
Why don't you ask? Yeah, go ahead.
Just a question, extension to what you were saying in terms of the timing component of the luck. How do you get that right? Or to participate in the context what Alok was saying, how does the guy who was sitting right in front of your office just not pre-time what his innovation or ideation is and just make sure it is right in time?
One, that is the definition of luck. But the most successful people have one, at least for me, one very defining characteristic in whatever they do. And that is called, there's many words for it, I call it presence. And what presence means is they are present in the moment where they are. They're not thinking of what's going to happen next, or what happened yesterday, or what happened half an hour ago. And if you are there and you're present, you can see things happening clearer and take action. And so part of it is just being aware, being there, watching for it.
If you just wore orange robes and just make that hair,
Look, you're a dangerous man.
and thoda daadi wadi uga do,
That's not a compliment there.
So, Vinay will take the last question from Vinay.
Suman, just following up on the Israeli example that you gave, how important is the background of the founders, the education, or who they have been referred by when you make a choice?
All of them are important, because at the end of the day, when I invest, I'm not investing on a financial spreadsheet.
Right.
VC is investing in a person. They're pointers to the person. All of those are pointers to the person, right? one of my most successful investments was a guy who another VC told me he'll never invest in ever again.
Okay.
And it was a bad reference, actually. But I had a real belief in him, and I've known him, and I chose to ignore it. It worked for me. On the flip side, I've hired lots of people from the best business schools and MIT, IIT, and they've been utter disasters. So, there's no knowing how and what. It's just your instinct. And partly